If you can play better than me, I'll marry you right here in front of everyone." That's what she said, standing there in her designer heels, laughing like she just told the world's funniest joke. We were in the middle of the faculty lounge at Crestmore Academy, and every head turned to watch the show. I didn't laugh. I just tightened my grip on the old, scuffed violin case in my hand, the one she'd already called pawn shop chic, and said nothing. Her name was Vanessa Carlisle, head of the music department, daughter of one of the school's biggest donors, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and own it before she even opened her mouth. And me, I was the new substitute music teacher, Marcus Lane, 51 years old, salt and pepper beard, wearing the same navy blazer I'd owned for a decade. I'd been hired to cover for a teacher on maternity leave. In her eyes, I was the perfect target. It started the second we met. I'd barely stepped through the gates when she told me the service entrance was around back. I introduced myself. She refused to shake my hand. When she heard I was taking some of the advanced classes, her laugh could have cut glass. "I teach the real musicians," she said, "the ones headed to Juilliard. You might try campfire songs. They'll be more your speed." She made sure her voice carried through the hallways. By the time I walked into my first class, half the students were already smirking. One girl in the front, shiny blonde hair, perfect posture, said, "Mrs. Carlisle told us you probably learned music from YouTube." I smiled and wrote my name on the board. "Then I guess we'll find out if YouTube's any good." Halfway through the lesson, Vanessa herself showed up, leaning on the door frame like she owned the place. "Just observing," she said. Then she spotted my violin and laughed loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Is that thing held together with tape, students?" This is why we invest in proper instruments. I could have taken the bait. I didn't. I just told them, the instrument doesn't make the musician. She shot back, "No, but proper breeding and natural talent do, and those can't be taught later in life." Then came the bet right there in front of my students. If I could outplay her, she'd marry me. She was so sure I'd back down, she grinned like a cat dangling a mouse. I said, "Maybe another time," and that only made her laugh harder. The thing is, I wasn't here to prove anything to her. My job was to teach, even if the kids I'd been handed weren't competition material in her book. Jamal, who could barely hold a bow steady. Sarah, whose stage fright was so bad her hands shook before she played a note. Miguel, who was all enthusiasm and zero technique. Vanessa said they were hopeless. I didn't see it that way. After classes ended, I stayed late repairing an old violin for Sarah that she thought was beyond saving. One by one, they trickled back into the room, each with an excuse for being there, and stayed to learn things I'd never get away with in the official curriculum. We played by ear, worked on jazz riffs, explored textures and colors the sheet music didn't mention. By 9 o'clock that night, I had a room full of kids grinning like they'd just discovered magic. Of course, word got back to Vanessa. She stormed into my class the next morning, waving the school policy manual about unauthorized after-hours sessions. Told me their parents had been notified that I was setting them up for failure. Then she leaned in, all perfume and poison, and said, "That marriage bet, it's going to be official, at the donor gala. Let's see you back out in front of the people who sign our paychecks." I shrugged it off until the flyers went up, until the school's social media posted, "Music Department Challenge at the Gala." Her terms were public now. If I played better than her, she'd admit she was wrong and donate 50 grand to a charity of my choice. If I refused or lost, I'd resign immediately. It spread like wildfire. Parents, alumni, even local music blogs were talking about it. The comments weren't pretty. The night before the gala, I overheard her rehearsing with 3 guys from the State Symphony. "Make sure you're there," she told them. "I want witnesses when he fails or chickens out." I went home, pulled an old photo album from the closet, and stared at a version of myself most people here would never believe existed, standing on stage at the Royal Albert Hall, shaking hands with conductors, holding trophies from competitions people trained their whole lives for. 15 years ago, I'd been someone else, someone whose name sold out concert halls in minutes. Then a drunk driver ran a red light. My wife died instantly. My daughter hung on for 3 days. My hands were crushed in the wreck. I was told I'd never play again. But I did 2 years of physical therapy, rebuilding from nothing. I had a comeback concert scheduled. 3,000 tickets gone in 10 minutes. And then the night of, I stood backstage and realized I didn't want it anymore. Music, fame, applause. None of it mattered without them. I walked away. Now I was about to step into a ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and million-dollar smiles to face a woman who thought she knew what excellence was. The gala began with the students she'd handpicked, flawless technique, zero heart. Then Jamal walked out. Vanessa's voice carried across the room. "How brave. I hope we have medical on standby." Jamal's hands shook, but he looked at me. I nodded. He played the piece we'd worked on together, part classical, part jazz, imperfect but alive. The polite applause that followed meant more to me than any standing ovation I'd ever had. Then Vanessa took the stage. Her Brahms concerto was exactly what I expected, perfect, precise, cold as marble. The applause was loud but polite in a different way. And then it was my turn. I didn't touch the gleaming loner violin she'd left in my classroom. I opened my own battered case. The room went quiet. Some people even gasped. They recognized it. I stepped to the mic. "Before I play, I want to say, music isn't about competition. It's about connection." Vanessa cut me off. "Spare us the speech. Play or forfeit." So I played. The first note hung in the air like a held breath. Then came the story. My story poured into every phrase, every shift, every breath between notes. I moved from my own composition into Paganini's Caprice 24, then into the Bach chaconne she'd used to humiliate me weeks ago. But this time it wasn't just notes. It was grief and healing, love and loss, a reminder that music can make you cry without a single word. When the last note faded, no one moved. Then the applause came, a tidal wave of sound. And from somewhere in the room, a voice said, "Oh my God, it's him." James Darrow, a conductor who'd known me in my other life, walked to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Lane is Michael Torres Augustine." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. People whispered. Vanessa stood frozen, her face pale. I told them the truth about the accident, the recovery, why I walked away. And then I looked right at her. "You asked why I wouldn't play for you. It's because you wouldn't have heard the music, only the challenge to your crown." By the time I was done, donors had pledged $500,000 to fund scholarships for kids who love music but couldn't afford instruction. I told the board I'd stay, but only if the program changed. More inclusion, less elitism. And Vanessa, she could keep her job if she was willing to learn. She didn't answer that night. 3 days later, she showed up outside my classroom with a resignation letter. I handed it back. If you want dignity, you stay. You learn. You earn back their trust. It wasn't easy. The kids didn't forgive her overnight. Parents complained. But she sat in my classes, took notes, watched me teach. She apologized to every student she'd belittled. She started repairing instruments with me in the mornings. And little by little, she changed. A year later, at the next gala, we played a duet, her precision and my soul weaving together into something new. Jamal was off to Berkeley. Sarah had conquered her stage fright and won a state competition. Miguel was composing pieces I couldn't stop humming. When the lights went down, Vanessa turned to me. "You didn't just save them, you saved me." I shook my head. "You saved yourself when you chose growth over pride." And maybe that's the point. People think excellence is about being untouchable, but the truth, it's about being reachable. being willing to learn to be wrong, to start over. So now I want to hear from you. If someone's been written off, labeled not good enough, do they owe it to the world to prove themselves? Or is it enough to quietly know their own worth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about what excellence really means.